So that we're here with Doug McCrea of McCrea Cellars out in Rainier, Washington, and fortunate enough to come down to his open house. And Doug, can you tell us a little bit? So obviously some people might know the McCrea Cellars. Today we're doing the Sleeta. Can you explain a little bit about the two different brands and what your passions are behind each one of those?
Well, McCrea Cellars was initiated in 1988, and we started on what we call the Rhone Adventure in 1989.
Okay.
When I discovered a little vineyard in the Columbia River Gorge that had these old Grenache vines. And I mean, in that year, old was 20 or more years old. So those vines have been around a while.
Wow.
And we started that, and then I realized that if Grenache grew at that location, that Syrah would probably do well. So we planted the second vineyard at Syrah. The first was David Lake and Red Willow. And for a while we blended the two, the Grenache and the Syrah. And then finally I felt that the Syrah was ready. And in the 94 vintage, we released that in about the holidays of 96. So that was the second Syrah ever in Washington State. And from there, things just seemed to blossom. For a while, it kind of lulled because I couldn't find anyone that would really pick up on Syrah, which is ironic if you look at the situation today.
Yeah.
But finally, both Dick Boucher, terrific grower of the Yakima Valley, and then Jim Holmes of Ciel de Cheval and Red Mountain, we talked, and they both planted Syrah in 1994. So for Washington State, those are actually some of the oldest vines. There are a couple of other vineyards that are close to it, but that's some of the oldest material. And then it just kept going from there, and ultimately now, with the McCrea brand, we produce about 5 white Rhone varietals, which would be Grenache Blanc, Roussanne, Marsanne, Picpoul, and then on the red side, well, of course, Syrah for a very long time, Grenache. With Jim Holmes, we planted Mourvedre, which is really Monastrell, right? Spanish grape, as is Grenache. And a rather uncommon one called Cunoise. And we've been making those guys for a long time. So the label has done, I think, really well. I've had a lot of good response.
And you're about 2,000 cases or so?
We are now. We've cut back a little bit because times are difficult. I think for the whole wine industry, everybody's reeling a little bit with the economy as it is. Typical production for McCrea Cellars is about 4,000 cases.
Okay.
So we're about 3 now, so we're right about in there.
So what was your passion in getting so lined up, step tone behind the Rhone varietals? Yeah, why the Rhone
varietals? Well, a moment ago we were talking about my birthplace, New Orleans, and I actually experienced those wines when I lived there as a kid.
Okay.
My grandfather was in the restaurant business, and he really knew his wine. And then when I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in the early 60s, there weren't too many people doing anything along those lines, so that kind of was a dropout, but I could still purchase Chateauneuf or whatever it was. The little it was coming over in those days.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of Rhone wine around to find, but there was something about, there was just something about the flavors. I just had an affinity for them. And as you mentioned, your love for cooking, and I'm the same way. I love to cook. A lot of the foods we had today were actually my recipes.
Yeah.
I just have always felt that Rhone varietal wines in general are just some of the most food-friendly wines that you can ever find. They just work really well.
Just, do you think that's because they tend to be a little bit more acidic, or the spicy character of them, or what?
I think it's more the spicy character, the flavors, and also the fact that the Bordeaux varietals are wonderful, and everybody has their different takes of what they like and what they don't like. I personally don't think Bordeaux varietals work as broad a spectrum of foods as the Rhone varietals do. I think that's the major key. I think the Rhone varietals can hit in so many different foods probably better.
Okay.
I have made wines of Bordeaux varietal. I've made Cabernet, I've made Merlot, I've made Cabernet Franc. I've never made Petit Verdot. So.
And we've never made Carmenere, right?
Never made Carmenere, right? Neither one of those. But I've done those for clients predominantly.
Okay.
So that's kind of the basic story of the McCrea brand. We're well distributed. We're probably in Puget Sound, we probably have about 200 accounts. We're also distributed in Japan and several other states as well. So it's gone quite nicely. I mean, I'm very happy with the way the brand has developed, and I think it's a two-edged sword because of the fact that now we find, for example, that here in Washington State, rather than about the 5 acres of Syrah that was in the ground when I actually released the 96, not when we made the 94, I'm sorry, when we made the 94 and released it in 96, there was about 5 acres in the ground of Syrah. Now there's 4,000.
Mm.
It's gone ballistic. And there's about we believe that there's about 800 individual bottlings of the grape.
Wow.
So it's really changed. Times have changed a lot.
So fast forward to today's release party, which is all about the Salida.
Is another brand that I've recently developed called McCrea Cellars.
Mm-hmm.
Salida meaning to leave or to exit. So the name Salida is a metaphor for harvest, for when the grapes, quote, leave the vineyard. That was the purpose in naming it that. That happened as a lark. I have a friend who manages a vineyard that we source from, which is our primary source of our new Spanish Iberian line. And the vineyard is called Tucayote.
Mm-hmm.
And the gentleman that manages that vineyard called me up in 2006 and said, hey, you know, Doug, this is weird, but got a guy who couldn't fit all of his Tempranillo on his truck. And he has about 1,000 pounds and he left it here. Would you like it? And he said, I'm coming to Puget Sound tomorrow and I'll be happy to run it over for you. And I went, darn right. His name is Phil Klein. He owns Natchez Heights Vineyard and Winery. And I said, sure, that'd be fun. I've never played with Tempranillo. So I made some Tempranillo. And after a while I'm going, wow.
Some good stuff.
This stuff is actually like, this is Spanish stuff. I mean, it's got the right flavor profile. It's working. And so I said, well, gosh, hey, is there any chance maybe I could follow this up in, you know, the next year in 07 and get a little bit more? And he said, sure, I'll cut you loose a little bit of it. So that worked out. And then he called me in 2008 and he said, you're not going to believe this. Same story all over again. But this time it's Malbec.
Hmm.
I've got half a ton of Malbec. And if you'd like to fiddle around, I said, absolutely, let's do it. So he brought the Malbec over. So this brand just started to blossom.
Which is a little bit ironic, being Malbec's a Bordeaux varietal.
Yeah,
but
it's, well, Cahors.
Yeah.
It's actually, its home is actually down by the Pyrenees, so it's, Bordeaux would be north of it by probably 100 miles.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, not sure about the mileage exactly, but yeah, Malbec technically is not a Bordeaux varietal.
But people would consider it.
They kind of think it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's often mistaken as one. That's fine.
Whatever.
So that's how.
Actually, I was going to say, actually, New World, it's probably an Argentinian varietal in terms of what.
Boy, it's
yeah.
Argentina, right?
It's gone on fire down there.
So we wanted a white for the label.
Yeah.
And there's a friend of mine who's a winemaker. His name is John Martinez. I don't know if you ever
You know John very well.
Okay, you know John. And he had contracted with Bill Denho from Albarino.
Yep.
And John, the first time I met John, he was at a winemaker's dinner I was doing in Seattle. And we just hit it off, you know.
Well, two guys from Rhone, I mean, of Rhone varietals.
Yeah, he was very impressed with the wines.
Yeah.
That's when he was still a dentist back east.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I said, hey, John, is there any chance I could? And so sure enough, he cut loose a ton of Albarino in this past fall.
Where do you see Rhone varietals going in the next 10 years in Washington State? Like, how do you think that they're going to come even more to prominence than, for example, say Syrah even has?
That's a tough question, because I think right now Syrah's in trouble. And there was a panel that was done about 6 weeks ago out at the Washington Association of Wine Grape Growers.
The WAG, yeah.
Yeah, at WAG. Brian Carter led the panel. It was called Syrah or Fubar. Right now, and this is not just Washington State, it's happening in California as well.
It's kind of industry-wide right now.
Fallen out of grace.
Yeah.
And I think there's some good reasons for it in Washington State. And I think Paul Greggett, actually, who was on that panel, pretty well nailed it. And I think the primary reason is that, and as you know, the Washington wine industry on a whole has just ramped. I mean, in the past, 5 or 6 years, we've gone from maybe 300 wineries to now 700, whatever it was. So it's more than double in that period of time. It lulled along, and then it's just gone ballistic. consequently, and sort of subsequent to that, Syrah was doing quite well, and then Syrah just started being planted everywhere. And everybody wanted to plant Syrah. Everybody wanted to make Syrah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's okay, except for the problem is the grape is a chameleon. And it can lose its identity to wherever it's grown.
Right.
And I think there's a struggle right now with trying to understand what is Syrah? What is a great Syrah? What makes it so incredible? I think, fortunately enough, I started early. So we have some of the oldest vines in the state, which have been very helpful. And if you've ever had the Boucher version of it, the vineyard that he and I planted together back in '94 called the Grand Côte, you get all that meaty, smoky, gamey, blueberry, you know, that side of Syrah that's like a great Côte Rôtie. There are a few of those around the state, but not very many. So I think that it's an identity crisis with the grape right now, coupled with just too darn much of it. So what will happen with the Rhone grapes? I think it'll level off. I think over time Syrah will still be a very prominent grape in Washington state. But I think, much like California, that probably the Bordeaux varietals will still remain kind of the #1 in a sense.
Yeah.
It seems as though Grenache is really picking up lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, they had a seminar about that at the Taste Washington, yeah.
It was really good. It surprises me that Mourvedre hasn't, more so than it does.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually, as a winery, we've had tremendous success with Mourvedre.
I tasted your Mourvedre today. It's really good.
It's amazing
Yeah.
how well it's worked.
I know.
You know, and I think that grape is going to be more prominent. I think actually people may not realize, if they're not careful, the difficulty of Grenache.
Meaning what?
It's a very difficult vine to work with.
Okay. So from the vineyard's perspective or growing
From a
perspective?
growing perspective, yes, it's a tough grape. Like as is the grape Cunoise. They're very similar to one another in that regard, and we work with Cunoise as well. I believe that there's a very good likelihood that the Iberian varietals will really jump, and theoretically, in truth, Grenache is an Iberian varietal. Its true name is Garnacha Tinta, right? And Mourvedre is really Monastral. It's a Spanish grape. Both are.
But they happen to grow really good in Rhone.
Pardon me?
They happen to grow really good in Rhone.
They grow very well in Rome, but they also grow very well in Spain. And I think it's been overlooked more than you may think. Have you ever had any of the great Goumias?
I'm not.
Ooh, they're incredible wines.
Yeah.
I was at Hospice de Rhone about 3 years ago.
But having said that, I'm a big sucker for Spanish wines in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
They finally got smart, and they brought in, instead of only just the guys from France or the United States or Australia or whatever, or South Africa, they brought in Spanish winemakers.
How'd that go?
And it was an epiphany to taste some of those wines. Remarkable wines that these guys are making there. So I also think that those grapes are going to really do well. Watch out for Tempranillo.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be quite a future for that grape in the state, because we're already beginning to see that it translates, and that's the key. I think there are certain grapes that when they leave Europe, they don't translate that well here in Washington state.
Right.
Many do, but in my opinion, there are some that don't. So that's just the way it goes.
If somebody was new to McCrea Cellars or Salida, and they could only buy one wine, what wine do you think would be a good one to start with?
If I were, well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. If you want to kind of go for the pinnacle, it would be the Boucher Grand Côte Syrah.
Okay.
Hand in hand with that, I would say the Mourvedre, you know. Although then I get torn because we make a blend red. It's called Sirocco, and now it's white counterpart, the Sirocco Blanc. So it's hard, but I guess I would do that. And obviously with Salida it would be Tempranillo, because you want people to understand the grape. You know, what is it about? And although we're making, you know, now several different versions of it, 3 versions of it, I think the pure Tempranillo itself is really important, because people will have a greater understanding of what that grape's about rather than it necessarily being blended.
Yeah. Cool. Where do you see McCrea Cellars at in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think we're leveled off and we're happy.
In a holding pattern kind of thing?
No, it's not a holding pattern. It's just that we've leveled off. We're not.
Okay.
We don't see any reason to grow it anymore. The company's well, this will be my 25th crush of McCrea Cellars this fall. So, you know, the company's been around a while. I think with Salida we'll keep growing, not immensely. We'll probably take it up to, I don't know, it's hard to say, very hard to say. Depends on what the future brings. Maybe upwards as high as 1,500 to 2,000 cases, but not that large. You know, we kind of want to keep it a relatively small production. And you know, I've been around this a long time. I've been, you know, 25 years in this industry is quite a while.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest producer of Syrah now in Washington State, since David passed away.
Wow.
So, and the oldest producer of Viognier. We were the first winery to ever release Viognier in Washington. Several firsts in the room, family. I'm figuring probably I'd like to continue doing this for maybe about 5 more years.
And then what?
7.
You gonna hand off to somebody?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it a lot, but
Well, people are gonna be outraged though if your wines ever stop production. You're gonna have to pass it on to somebody.
Well, maybe there's somebody interested enough that would like to, you know,
Carry on the
torch.
torch. Yeah.
I don't know that my children will. You never know if they will.
Right.
I can tell you this: when I was first around Coal City Creek, Paul didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, he went off to community college and did some stuff like that. He didn't want to do anything with wine. And now, look at it. Paul is Coal Cedar Creek. I mean, Al's kind of, you know, pretty much semi-retired now.
Yep.
So I think that you never know what the kids will do.
Or
One of my boys may decide that that's what they want to do. Right now, if you were to say, do you think it will happen? I'd say no.
you could also end up like Bob Betts and just sell it.
That's another thing to do too.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm not sure. Kim and I would like some time together, away from just being in the industry, because we work very hard. You know, we work hard.
Oh, yeah, you're on the road a lot too.
Yeah, I am, but I mean, yeah, I got to drive over to Eastern Washington a lot.
Right.
I spend a huge amount of time in the vineyards. That's where that's where the wine's made. When the grapes get here,
You just try not to screw it up.
yeah, I mean, you know how it goes. You're
Yeah,
doing this,
yeah.
so you just want to do the right thing and bring out all the wonderful characteristics that those grapes have to offer, and not make a mistake.
Yeah.
But that viticultural side of it is that's the critical mass.
Have you ever had Torontos from Argentina?
Yes.
Do you think that's a grape we'll ever see up here? I really like that. I really like that grape
It's
a lot.
Possibility. I don't know. You know, it's the same issue. You got to understand the system too in Washington State, because fundamentally, you don't just bring cuttings in. Although we do know that's been done, and we do know some of the people have done it, but it's illegal. And the guys that I work with, like a Dick Boucher or Jim Holmes and whatever, and the Childs family that own Two Coyote and Joe Hattrick at Elephant Mountain and such, they stay, within basically the confines of what the, state agricultural department insists on, which is they want clean vines.
Yeah.
So most of that material is all coming now through Inland Desert Nursery.
If there's somebody out there that's viewing this video from out of state, how would they can just go to your website and order the wines direct, or?
They can order the wines from both the websites.
Okay. I mean, assuming it's a state you can ship to and all that, right?
And a Salida website.
Okay.
So they're both there. Yeah, and they can order directly. We have a shopping cart on Salida.
Okay.
And I think with the McCrea, I think it's still through Susan. I think she still handles all of that aspect of it and stuff. So yeah, they can do that. What people really need to know is that fundamentally, I'm probably not going to be around here to watch it, but fundamentally what's going to happen, Washington State is clearly going to be the great region of the United States. Flat out. Because we have a climate here. We have a climate here, and well, not only just a climate, but we just got, the soils are incredible. I mean, everything about this place is poised for greatness.
And we're still very young.
It's very vintage. Yeah, we're very young.
Yeah.
And it's a vintage-oriented, place too as well. I mean, there are better ones than others.
Yeah.
We all know that. We've been through it. So California is more of a Mediterranean climate, and that's just the nature of the beast.
It is what it is. So cool. Well, thanks, Doug, for your time.
Thank you too.
And we'll look forward to keep drinking your vino. Thank you.
Cool.